Well, we do have a race now for the BC Liberal leadership with George Abbott and Moira Stillwell, two former cabinet ministers, declaring their intentions this past week. Next week, expect to hear from Rich Coleman, Mike DeYoung, Kevin Falcon, maybe Christy Clark, about whether they are in or out. And then the race is really going to heat up. As I say, later we'll talk to Alex Akumas, open up the phone lines. Right now, joined by my friend Alise Mills, pundit, consultant, BC Liberal strategist. How are you today, Alise?
I'm great, Sean. How are you?
I'm good. It's been another interesting week in BC politics. What do you think of the contenders so far, Elise?
I think, I have to say Moira and George are great BC Liberals. Moira is a firecracker, and George is one of the most compassionate, funny guys, has been a great minister for us, and I congratulate both of them, wish them both the best of luck, and the more the merrier. Bring it on. Yeah,
well, so who's going to come in next?
I believe that we've got Mr. Falcon. I hear it's Tuesday. But then again, the rumor mill was hot and heavy yesterday, so I'm always hesitant to say that I know for sure, but I believe it would be Tuesday. I also heard that Christy Clark was thinking Tuesday, but if I was an organizer for Christy, I would have pulled out of Tuesday and maybe chosen another day.
Yeah.
But I understand Rich Coleman this week. I think it's going to be very interesting. And then I think what's also interesting, because the audience here is different. It's the membership and the future membership. So how they're announcing is really important. And I have to say for George, I was really disappointed how static that was. It was behind the podium. He had them lined up behind him. If you're going to talk about connecting rural communities to the South and supporting getting engagement going with the communities, you really shouldn't be doing it at the Pan Pacific. So I think that was a bit of a problem. And with Moira, who I think is a great person, I was surprised to see her social media wasn't ready. Even George Abbott's, I tried a URL, and that was broken. So message to all candidates, be really ready. This is the big race. And if you want to be premier, you better act like a premier. So, yeah.
Why is the social media aspect so important? Talk to me about this, Elise, because you're much more familiar with this than I am. I don't Twitter. I've just recently joined the world of Facebook, but I saw what I thought was a kind of a nasty little comment in the Vancouver Sun from one of their technology writers, really lambasting Moira Stillwell for not, being active on Twitter and all that. Why is that important?
Well, I have to say, first of all, we have been hashtagging you to encourage you to join Twitter.
I know.
If you actually look for your name, you'll see it, and I'm a contributor to that.
Oh,
so
man.
Be on Twitter. But, yeah, come on, Tom Fletcher's on Twitter. You
all
can
right.
Be on Twitter. But I think it was Jillian Shaw, and, this day and age, it's not just the under 20 that are tweeting around. I'm an active tweeter. I learn a lot from Twitter. I think the strength of a campaign team is who's engaging with social media, because it's not just about, turning on your BlackBerry. It's about hearing from people across the country, in smaller communities. BC is a bit geographically challenged. I mean, as all of us know, we live in the most beautiful province in the country, but it is difficult to get to each other. And for us to be able to come together, talk, engage, and really get active. And social media is a blessing for a province like British Columbia. It's hard for me to understand why a leadership candidate, and not just a leadership candidate, somebody that's proclaiming to want to be premier, can't wrap their head around that. That is an undercurrent in the party that needs to be, brought forward. We have a lot, as you know, there's a lot of us BC Liberals out there tweeting, talking about the issues, and we're sharing ideas with people from other provinces as well. It's a great way to go. And Jillian was on the money. It was disappointing, and I think it was a little embarrassing.
Let me ask you this, Elise, and maybe it gets to this sort of generation gap thing. It's been noted that a lot of these candidates are not, there's not a lot of young Turks really throwing their name into the hat, and I'm no young guy myself. I think that's probably explain some of my alienation from some of the social media, and the same can be said for George Abbott and Moira and some of these other candidates. We're not talking about real spring chickens here, and is that part of the problem, do you think?
Well, I think, you look at someone like Rich Coleman. He's number one on the social media, and he does it really, really well. I mean, as he says, he's got these big thumbs, and he's out there with his BlackBerry. His Facebook is very active as well, and he's always been like that. So that's fantastic. So there's no age excuse there, and a lot of the people that I follow or communicate with are in their mid-40s, early 50s. They're consultants. They're in the political realm. It's a great idea sharing, and I've learned a lot. But I think that it's ignorant to believe that I'll back up. I think Twitter is a very hard place for politicians of any stripe to be. It's gotten to the point where I think some politicians have just stopped watching what's going on because some of the insults that fly around. Bill Good makes great mention of this, I think, at least once a week. I hear him talk about people, just feeling like they can say anything.
Yes.
The people that I choose to follow are people that are articulate and I don't always agree with them, actually more times than not, but we're sharing an adult discussion, and there's no four-letter words, there's no threats, but I think it can be very intimidating to politicians, and maybe George and Moira don't want to wade into it, but the benefits far outweigh the negatives, and I'm actually looking forward to, I expect for Rich, when he comes out, that you're going to see an explosion on the social media, so I think it's going to be pretty exciting there, and I would suspect, Kevin Falcons is kind of a moot point right now because there's no activity there, but I suspect that might change.
Well, this all leads into a question I was going to ask you, Alise, and that is around really the mechanics of this whole leadership race. Who are these candidates? Who are they going to be reaching out to? Who is it important for them to communicate to? Because this isn't a general election. They're not trying to appeal to the broader British Columbian public just yet, although, of course, they don't want to turn them off. But who's their target audience? Who do they have to be going over for the next few months here?
Well, I think you're touching on a really important issue, and I've said this to some of the organizers and some of the candidates. You've got a real issue here because you've got to immediately connect with an audience that's pre-established and ones that you hope jump in, and then you're quickly gearing up to carve out your 2013 message, which is the entire province, right? So I think it can be quite intimidating, but if I was advising a candidate, there would be, and I don't want to give the free advice and I don't want to give the tips, but I think that when I say outreach, look between the lines there, outreach, and I think that you have to remember also to all candidates, no matter how popular, unpopular this premier is at this point, you have to remember what this province looked like 10 years ago. And, I was thinking about this today with the departure of Danny Williams because I think we lost a little sparkle in Canada when he left. You love or hate how he did it. Both Premier Campbell and Premier Williams managed to achieve the same thing. Different approach, but stood firm, and we have to remember that. So I would hesitate getting candidates out there pushing too far away from an agenda that actually, apart from the last few months, has been good for the province. You don't have to stand next to the premier, but you definitely have to start talking about leveraging the successes we've had, reminding people where we've come from and where we're going. And this is all part now of what we talked about. Once we've done the heavy lifting for the previous terms, where were we going to go now? And I'm really excited. Are we going to talk about healthcare reform? George Abbott was health minister.
Yes.
For enough of a period of time. He should be talking about addressing some of those issues on reform.
I agree.
Moira could be talking about education reform. I was hoping to see more policy, to be honest. You have to really engage, and policy is not boring. It's the core of why we all stand under one flag.
Yeah, Alise, hold it there. I got to take a break. I want to get back to that, and I also want to talk about Christy Clark of Open